All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Legacy Premier League. Danny Batterman alongside.
Robert Stan, aka ORS.
All right, can you hear me?
And we've got bug on bug action
Share screen.
for you this round. It's Nick Feola. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name correctly. If not, Nick, believe me, you'll be able to get me back later, I promise.
Let me move. Oh, this is...
With what he's calling bug 3 drops. His list is up on the screen right now. Kind of similar to the Reed Dukes that Reed won the last Legacy GP with. But
challenge.
A little different. We got Leovolds, we got True Names, we got Goyfs, we got Strixes, we got Manadorks. We've got some Lilianas, we got some Jaces. Just good solid Magic cards.
Yeah, this I actually watched Reed Duke's videos that he put up on CFB with the deck, and I sort of watched the evolution of it. And this deck seems much more focused on planeswalkers and value, as opposed to Reed Duke, who was focusing more on equipment and the True Name Nemesis. Is
indeed. I do like. I mean, Leovold has been one of my pet cards since he got spoiled, so I'm happy to see his debut in the league here. I also like 3 copies. I think Leovold is kind of absurd in the format right now. Like, just does everything you want it to do.
Yeah, I agree. My deck list is only running 1 Leovold, but I'm constantly looking for opportunities to play more. Maybe I just need to bite the bullet and just run more. But yeah, I agree. Leovold, like, I find myself not cutting it in matchups, for example, and wishing I had more all the time. So there's no surprise that a high Leovold count made it into this deck.
Also, a single Gurmag Angler as just another giant threat. That he can power out through his cantrips, his removal spells, and his Manadorks.
The Gurmag Angler happens to be very good in the current predicted Legacy metagame, where everyone's going to be trying to play the new Sweetness, the Fatal Push, and Fatal Push just happens to also go well with Abrupt Decay. So, once again, no surprise that someone's trying to make Gurmag Angler good in Legacy, because, hey, it is good in Legacy.
Yeah, Zombie fishes are very powerful, it turns out. You wouldn't think a fish could do so much damage, but... Then at this point we could go over Brett's list, but you guys have seen it. It's Bug Delver. It's tried and true, really, ever since we figured out that we knew that Abrupt Decay was going to be a good Legacy card. It took us a little bit to figure out that Death Threat Shaman was going to be as good as it is. I'll admit to having my doubts when a friend of mine, Mark Galalague, was like, "Hey, I think Death Threat Shaman's going to be amazing in Legacy," and I was like, boy, was I wrong.
I was more surprised at how good Delver turned out to be in Legacy. Like, I had a bit of a feeling that Death Ray Shaman would be all right. And, like, I didn't think it would be as huge as it is. Like, to the point where people are willing to just splash colors for Death Ray Shaman. For example, there are many decks that will just touch green just for the activation of Death Ray Shaman. But as it turns out, Death Ray Shaman ended up being huge, and Delver ended up being bigger than I ever thought it would be. There's a new card in Amonkhet that has shades of Delver all over it. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about Amonkhet cards yet.
I don't see why not. The spoilers up.
But yeah, the 4-mana 3/2 Flying Death Touch that costs 3 less if a creature's died screams shades of Delver all over for me, especially in matchups where you can sort of force creatures to die. The Death Touch seems relevant, and having a creature die in grindy matchups is not an issue. So I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being sort of the Delver 2.0. Obviously, it's no turn 1 play, so it's not going to be as good in the tempo decks. But as a potential sideboard card in grinding matchups, I can see it being very good, especially since it trades up with Tombstalker and Gurmag Angler and Tarmogoyf and things like that.
Yeah, that's actually not something I thought of. It also dodges Abrupt Decay. which is
yes, it
going to be
does.
flying all over the place in this matchup. Being I don't know. I think it's between either Swords to Plowshares or Abrupt Decay is the removal spell of choice. I understand Lightning Bolt is a very powerful card, but I think Swords is obviously great, and Decay's place in the format has been really it's been at the top of the format ever since it was printed. There are decks that literally splash green for sideboard Abrupt Decays, like Storm or Reanimator even, like we saw earlier.
Yes, Abrupt Decay is. I personally like it a little bit more than Swords, just because the ability to hit things besides creatures is a bit more relevant than being able to hit bigger creatures, because a lot of the big creatures are still undercosted, such as Tarmogoyf.
Mm-hmm.
However, Swords is still great in decks like Miracles, where you just need a 1-mana removal spell that'll hit anything. The Miracles deck wouldn't function if you were forced to play Abrupt Decay instead of Swords on the same level that it does now, assuming that color requirements weren't an issue. Like if you were just forced to swap those two cards, two 2-mana card as opposed to a 1-mana card is just big in the tempo matchups.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. So it looks like we're
That should be on it, right?
we got some discussion going on in chat about Miracles and its survivability for the ban list coming up Monday.
Honestly, I think I'm sort of the mindset that it's been too long. But I was wrong about Splinter Twin. I thought in Modern, for example, I thought that it had reached a point in where they weren't going to ban it, despite the fact that it was clearly too good. And I think the same about Miracles. I think Miracles is just a little bit too good, so they're probably not going to take an axe at it. Hopefully they don't go too crazy and do something like Brainstorm, which is a card I love, and one of the main reasons that I play Legacy is the amazing fun that a good Brainstorm can give you. But I also don't really want them to completely destroy the Miracles deck by taking out maybe perhaps part of that countertop combo. So I don't really know what you would go after. Perhaps Mentor push the deck a little too far. Maybe Predict is just something that makes the deck a little bit better. Is something that I would try to get out of Miracles as opposed to just completely gutting the deck. But then again, I love Miracles, so
yeah, I've played it for 5 years, so I'm a little biased, but
yeah,
I can't really weigh in. But I think even more importantly than that, or at least more importantly, relevantly right now, I think we've got a match on our hands.
Ooh.
So yeah, it looks like a little bit of a slow 7 for Nick, but he's got Ponder to try to fix things. Brett, at least from it appears on screen that it looks like he mulliganed to 6.
Yes, I didn't catch the 7, but this is he can't be happy about this 6.
No, I mean on the draw with the scry, I don't hate it, but it's not great. Like he's got a little bit of interaction, but he's going to be very. He's scryed to the bottom, so
I can hear you, Mike.
Pretty clearly, either looking for a green sorcerer cantrip, drew a second wasteland, which is going to be pretty. It's a card that taps for mana, but Nick has set himself up pretty effectively here with two of his basics.
Yeah, Nick has definitely played a game or two against Wasteland, so came prepared with the basic setup. Not going to be hurt by it this game, and Brett may have been hoping that his 6-card hand could maybe buy a turn or two with a Wasteland on a crucial non-basic, but it's not the case, and now he just needs to hope that his days hit something, and it looks like it's going to be hitting a Brainstorm.
the rare alternate cast days actually paying its mana cost. Very very heads up play by Brett. By the way, we specifically, I mean, not heads up, but just good strong technical play. We know because they have deck lists that Nick does not have days in his deck, so he's making sure that he doesn't fall even further behind by not getting tempoed out here.
Absolutely. I would have wondered if perhaps saving the days for either pitching to Force of Will and hoping to get another lane so you can have or another blue card so you can have a second Force of Will up, or it's trying to save the days for a 3-drop might have been more ideal. I don't think it is, but I think it's a line that he may have considered, which is why we saw him take a while to actually play the days.
What we see there is that was something given to Nick by his partner, to wish him luck in the event. I think it's awesome. I'm jealous.
Agreed. I wish I had a partner, and I also wish that I had a sweet bouquet.
Yeah. True name Nemesis off the top for Nick here, with mana to pay through potential days due to that death right, and it lands. That is, Brett, outside of Liliana, does not really have an effective way to deal with that, erase that, and it's going to brick wall basically the remainder of Brett's hand in terms of Tarmogoyf, but the Delver does flip off Fatal Push, so Brett can start getting in there and can even kill that death right to boot. So we've now got a good old-fashioned race on our hands between slogging in for 3 damage return.
Yeah, and that was a
second true name's a good draw.
That was a very good draw. I was going to say that perhaps the Tarmogoyfs being good clocks if Brett could draw a green source to power them out, but Nick drawing that second true name Nemesis just, I think, will do it as if Brett doesn't have an answer to them. And you said you looked over deck list and he does not, so that is quite unfortunate.
Yeah, there's some Liliana the Veils, I believe, in Brett's deck. I could be wrong. I thought there were lilies.
I think the lilies are in. Well,
no,
I know for sure
there are lilies in Brett's deck. I was okay. Correct. We've seen it twice now. I should know his list. Yeah, just a pair of lilies, but going to be hard to do off what was 1 mana, but now 2 after finding a fetch land to finally deploy Tarmogoyf. And now it's Nick who's screwed on green with Tarmogoyf stranded in hand. Thankfully, if you're part of the South Florida Magic crew, True Name Nemesis is a very good blocker for Tarmogoyf, but Nick decides that he's just going to crash in and have Brett dead next turn. There's no lightning bolt, there's no math being done, so Brett's just running out of Tarmogoyf and hoping Nick has a momentary lapse of reason and decides not to attack for lethal. But wisely attacks with his true names, and we're on to game 2.
One last thing before sideboarding, worth noting for perhaps viewers that are newer to Legacy, that Brett knew the outs in his deck were potentially Liliana's, so he fetched the Bayou as his second land to give him the double black that he needs in addition to the green.
Yeah, Brett's been playing very well today.
Yeah, knowing your deck lists can be a big thing. I mean, it's a little bit of a story time here. While they adjust their sideboards, I managed to play in a Legacy League earlier today, and I thought I was on no outs, and being able to look through my deck list actually gave me a small line that I was able to brainstorm into a chain of draws that let me pull back a game. And unfortunately, I didn't see it beforehand, and Brett, clearly knowing his deck very well, was setting himself up to get those draws. But if you don't play to it, you don't get it. So
agreed. So For sideboarding, it looks like Brett has brought in Golgari Charm, which is the obvious. I was thinking about Winter Orb, which I don't know if I like Winter Orb against the 7 mana dork deck, but
Yeah.
you know, I think he just eventually decided not to go with it. Just cut all the counter magic, which isn't great in this matchup. No, go lower to the ground and draw a better 7, which it looks like he did, even though he's got 2 Expedition Verdant Catacombs in his hand. So the effects are good, but that definitely might stir some controversy in terms of quality.
I think I saw Nick actually trimming on Brainstorms, which I find interesting.
Really?
I may have just misseen the card that he was taking out, but if he did, in fact, trim on Brainstorms, then I find that very interesting because Brainstorm helps you dig for those more important cards, in addition to just being Brainstorm.
Yeah, I can see there was a logic of not wanting to be so cantrip heavy and just be more threat dense to bait out counterspells. I personally like Brainstorm. I registering 4 Brainstorms at this point. The reason why is my favorite thing about Legacy, considering I straddle Legacy and Vintage, and that to me is what gives the format its kind of its identity.
Yeah.
However, Legacy Premier League Season 1 competitor Lejay has famously played 3 Brainstorms and Shardless Bug, so it's not unheard of.
In Shardless Bug?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's almost as good there as it is in Miracles.
Right?
Nothing like setting up a Shardless agent with a good Brainstorm. I mean, I could have been wrong. Maybe it was the Ponders that were cut, but I think I saw a Brainstorm in the sideboard. So,
turn one death rate from Brett off one of those Verdants sets him up for a solid turn 2 of Delver and holding up Brainstorm to flip next turn. While still having mana to fatal push anything Nick might do. There are a lot of lines that are open to him at this point, including a Brainstorm of his own, but I don't know if that is something I'd recommend necessarily before casting that Delver, which is what he does.
Agreed. It's also tempting to try and he is going with the very aggressive route.
One Fugitive Wizard into Squire. Standard legacies right here. Nick is going to pick up what looks to be another land for his draw. Yeah, another Verdant Catacombs. And is passing the turn here, opting to play around Daze, not running his Baleful Strix into, potential blowout. I don't hate that line. What are your thoughts? We've shifted to main phase 2, so
I'm a fan, especially given the amount of cards Brett has in his hand and the fact that he has 2 3-drops that he wants to play, to trying to bait out the Daze here. Baleful Strix is a very juicy card. Being able to block a Tarmogoyf and draw a card is quite good, but I mean, sometimes you just won't win a game if you don't play into Daze, and I think that's what Nick saw. That just this wasn't a game that he could sit back and wait until he had 4 mana to play his 3-drops and 3 mana to play his Baleful Strix, especially given the likelihood of a Delver flip and Tarmogoyf growing beyond the Squire.
Yeah, I agree. that logic makes sense. I saw the bottom bar move and I assumed it went right to his end step. So just force a habit for me. Like as someone predicted, because we knew his hand. We had Brett brainstorming to make sure the Delver flipped and to power up the Tarmogoyf. We have now Fatal Push to remove the blocker, and we've got a very, very large chunk of life that Nick is about to lose because that Tarmogoyf is up to a 4/5, I believe, because we've got instant, artifact, creature, and land.
Yes.
Providing 2 of those archetypes, which is both a blessing when you play it alongside Tarmogoyf and a curse when you play it against Tarmogoyf.
This looks like an Abrupt Decay is going to hit that Tarmogoyf, but things are not looking good for Nick, unfortunately, because it is just... He's fallen too far behind. This Delver deck can apply a lot of pressure, and the Sylvan Library gas is just additional.
Library to draw additional cards, Wasteland to now take Nick off mana, which he can respond with the Abrupt Decay, but it still limits him in his plays, especially when his deck is centered around 3 drops. More answers and more ways to dig. I really like Brett's spot here, and I'm going to be, I would want to see how this plays out. It's going to be really cool to see if Nick can dig his way back, because Brett has a commanding lead, especially with what appears to be a second Delver of Secrets right off the top from that Ponder, alongside the Abrupt Decay that we and Brett knows about, because this putting it back with the Sylvan Library to flip it next turn.
Yes, that's why I've managed to even warm a copy of Toxic Deluge into my deck list. It just sometimes nothing will get you out of one of these aggressive Delver starts besides a Wrath, and looks like Nick's finding himself in that situation. Even creature-based decks can put a good use out of a Toxic Deluge, and I'm surprised that in a Planeswalker heavy deck like this, I mean, I suppose he also plays Hierarchs, so that makes a Deluge much less appealing, and True Name Nemesis is supposed to sort of be the answer to big things, but sometimes you just don't draw enough removal, and a bullet like that can come in handy to try and brainstorm and shuffle your way towards.
Nick, actually, something that I know that I might disappoint AJ Soccer by saying this, with an end of turn brainstorm without a shuffle effect, which is normally something that is kind of a major no-no in this format, but I didn't mind his play there because he was likely going to use all of his mana next turn, and he really needed an answer. He didn't come up with much. 2 lands and a True Name Nemesis. So he decided True Name does not answer flyers. Liliana does take out a Delver as opposed to sacking the Deathrite, but that is not going to do much because Brett has lethal right now.
Yes, and I think Brett decided to sacrifice the Delver just to reveal less information. It doesn't matter with decklist public, but it's just another sign, as I said from previously at the end of game 2, or at the game 1, sorry, that he is playing solidly and that he knows his deck and that he's on top of his game.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, showing an additional Abrupt Decay, like, we do have deck lists. It's just good mechanics.
Exactly.
So, this one, we got a third game. Ladies, gentlemen, and others in the chat.
Aha, I was correct. There are some brainstorms in the sideboard. Interesting configuration of 2 brainstorms and 2 ponders, as opposed to the 4 brainstorms first.
2 brainstorms? Okay. I'd be curious to talk with Nick about this one. I got nothing. You know what? He has a plan. that is not something I have ever personally seen in my 8 years playing this format. When was Mystical Tutor banned? That's around when I started. So, but
it was such an unusual play or sideboarding decision that I just kept second guessing myself. I'm like, oh man, did I just sort of goof here saying that he took out Brainstorms and he didn't, accuse him of sacrilege in Legacy? But these players have definitely played these matchups. Maybe Brett a little bit less, since Nick's bringing a little bit of a brew with the more Planeswalker heavy version of the 3-drops deck, and they know what they're doing. So I would definitely trust Nick's judgment. Perhaps I might disagree with it, but you can't always agree with them.
This isn't the Legacy Mediocre League.
Exactly. We've upgraded here.
So we've got a game. We've got a game 3, and Nick kept a very what was a very mana heavy hand with, at the time, one real threat that immediately got fatal pushed by Brett. Drew into a Leovold though, so that was arguably his best draw, because even though Brett has 2 answers in hand between Dismember and Abrupt Decay, Nick does get to profit off that and dig another card deeper if Brett chooses to fire off one of those removal spells on the very powerful Elf Advisor.
Yes, I think if Brett had known what was in Nick's hand, perhaps he would have tried to fire off that hymn to hit the one threat that was in it. But because obviously the players are not playing with perfect information, he wants to save the hymn to Torak until until Nick has less cards in hand, so that it will be less likely to hit lands and more likely to hit impactful cards. And here comes the hymn.
Yeah, the other thing this line does out of Brett is it allows him to use all of his mana between because he went Deathrite on 1, Dismember, so that was 2, and now he gets to use the full 4 by deploying him and Goyf. Unluckily for him, Nick, it left Lick with that Leovold.
Yeah, it looks like one of my hymns just hit the wrong 2 cards every time.
Yeah, I actually can't remember the last time I registered Hymn to Torak in a deck, but that is, with my luck, that is what frequently happens too. Delver off the top for Brett to apply even more pressure against a, relatively threat-like Nick. He's likely has a mystery card coming off of the Leovold. Maybe post. Okay. Yeah, he's got and then his draw step. I like Brett's line of waiting, because this tricks Nick into thinking he's got a clear path to equip Jite onto Leovold and waste his mana, which in the 3-drop deck is nice, because that would have effectively time walked him.
Yes. Unfortunately, Nick has a 1-drop to follow it up with, so...
He does, but he can't re-equip Jite this turn as a suicide ground blocker, as it were. It's also not likely that the draw of Leovold is going to be it might be a relevant play. There are still a couple of cantrips left in the deck, but he's not going to be able to deploy another powerful 3-drop due to this line.
Oh wow, hitting the Jite instead of the Leovold. I think Brett is thinking that he's got the ground covered with the Tarmogoyf. He's winning this race if the Delver flips, so just need to make sure that the biggest threat on the table, which is the Jite, is answered, as opposed to trying to play the removal game and trying to deal with Leovold that way. By targeting it directly.
Still does draw a card because Leovold is messed up.
Yes.
And
that's why most people will instinctively target the Leovold, just so that the opponent doesn't draw more cards. But once again, Brett seems to be on top of his game, and has a plan, and is just getting rid of the Jite, knowing that it's the most dangerous card that Nick has, especially if he were to draw, for example, a True Name Nemesis next turn.
Very true. Nick gets nets a break, and Brett not being able to flip his Delver, which is going to be a little more difficult to flip than normal due to that Leovold shutting off.
One card in hand.
Not shutting off the selection from the cantrips, but shutting off the draw from the cantrips, shutting off Brainstorm entirely.
Yes.
Speaking of Brainstorm, we get one mid-combat, it looks like.
I don't think I saw Submerges in Nick's list, so this might just be... I know what's going to happen this turn, so I'm going to just tap out and Brainstorm sort of thing.
Yeah, this Brainstorm, I think, was a little worse than the last one, the last game where he played the Liliana. I definitely can understand trying to draw towards threats, though, because that Tarmogoyf is still the biggest thing on the board, and if that Delver flips, Nick's going to be on a pretty quick clock. Brett wisely playing his fetch land to use Delver as a pseudo scry if he doesn't like the card he sees or even reveals.
Yeah. Yes.
Reveal Brainstorm would not be very good on this current board state.
Have you ever intentionally cast a Brainstorm into an opposing Leovold because you're just in such a bad situation? You need to. You can do it end of turn.
No, I haven't done that yet. I have cast a Preordain into a Leovold while playtesting with friends, and they didn't have he didn't actually own it, so I didn't see the art, and it was like, oh.
Yeah. Well, of course.
I didn't even realize that was a Leovold on board. I'm dumb.
Yeah, I did not win that game. Surprisingly, on my opponent's turn I Brainstormed for just to try and find one card because I was dead on board, and it didn't work out.
We do. We did see the Scry play off of Delver, not flipping once again, but picking up a Snapcaster Mage, which now we have the awkward dance of Snapcaster Mage plus Scavenging Ooze, and gets broken up by Nick tapping out of green.
Fuck.
This particular, actually, no, there's a Noble Hierarch on board still. Excuse me.
Kept the wrong fucking
I can read. I can read. I swear. But we now go through the awkward dance of Brett trying to get Nick to tap out of green, and Nick holding up green to play around the one Snapcaster Mage in Brett's 75.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if Nick decides to not play around the Snapcaster Mage. However, I am sort of surprised that the Underground Sea wasn't tapped for that Fatal Push, to just for the sake of leaving up more green mana. And this is actually a pretty great heads-up play, baiting the Scavenging Ooze with the Deathrite Shaman
sweet card to
Yep.
in order to Snapcaster Mage. I assume our removal spell for the Scavenging Ooze.
Likely, yeah. I mean, it's either going to be the It's got to be the Scavenging Ooze on this. It's either the Ooze or trying to think if there's a justification for the Leovold, because Tarmogoyf is no longer on the board and Leovold is still shutting down your cantrips and letting Nick draw into more gas.
I think once again, Brad identifies that the biggest threat on the table is unfortunately not the Leovold, even though the opponent will gain a lot of value off these removal spells on non-Leovold targets, and just killing the Scavenging Ooze because it's bigger than the Leovold. It gains life, and at this point, both players' life totals are an issue, and.
Brett's is, at this point, precariously low with both Leovold and the Gurmag Angler he is in the process of casting, representing lethal. Brett can add some cushioning through Deathrite Shaman removing creatures. He's definitely on the back foot and might not have a clean out to this Gurmag. Liliana helps, but it's likely just going to pick off a Noble at the moment. And it also doesn't flip the does not flip the
Leovold's so
Delver.
good.
Oh, and by the way, Nick gets to draw a card because Leovold is messed up.
Yeah, I was caught off guard by that. I just got to keep reading Leovold. It does more than you think it
Target
does.
player sacrifices a creature. Leovold also works when you target the player. Fun fact: if I Tendrils of Agony you and target you 12 times, you get to draw 12 cards to try to find your Mindbury trap. One good Liliana deserves another, as Nick now plays his Lily without the downside of giving Brett a cantrip to remove a blocker, and somewhat trap Brett in the abyss here.
Yeah, things are looking grim for Brett. He can keep the Deathrite alive, gain 2 life, trump the Gurmag Angler with the Delver. Oh.
Well, he's
from his point of view, at least.
Yeah,
he's not dead, but
he is not technically dead. I going over his deck lists, I don't think he has any outs, especially because like even Jace won't do it, and he's too low life for Toxic Deluge to actually matter. Verdant Catacombs is certainly not an out, and Nick Feola, South Florida Magic Crew, picking up his first win. Guess those cake pops proved to be lucky after all.
Yeah, still jealous about that. Oh,
Right?